Welcome to the print. The benchmark Sensex today crossed 39,000 points and has zoomed more than 1,300 points today. The analysts say that this is mainly on account of the exit polls predicting a stable government, a stable NDA government. Nearly 7 out of the 9 exit polls have predicted that the BJP-led NDA will get a clear majority. Only 2 have predicted that the NDA will fall short, but again, they will fall short by very little numbers. Because of this, analysts say, the whole concept of a continuity and stability is what is seeing the stock market surge. The stock markets are surging despite the fact that the NDA government in the past 5 years has not had a very stellar economic track record. Growth has been slowing, as we can see from many indicators, including auto sales and the trends in rural consumption. Jobs again remains a key distress point for the unemployed youth. The unemployment rate is at an all-time high of 6.1% according to a recent NSSO survey. There are also concerns regarding the fact that India's fiscal numbers seem to be in a mess. India's fiscal deficit has been revised upwards to 3.4% of gross domestic product. And this is despite the fact that a lot of expenses of the government have been can be classified as are being now classified as off-balance sheet exposures. Basically, they have been taken off the government's books, and still we are looking at a huge fiscal deficit on account of slowing tax collections. Also, there are a lot of your state-run public sector enterprises have been asked to shell out dividends, go in for buybacks. Some have even been asked to make advance payments. And despite all this, we are staring at a huge fiscal deficit. So this means that the NDA didn't have a really good 5-year track record, but still we are seeing the markets welcoming the news that the NDA government may again come back to power for a second term, just on the fact that they represent the fact that it's a stable and continuous government. So we now please do sending us your questions and we'll try to answer them. The first question that we have got is a clear majority necessary to push through reforms? Some of the reforms do need parliamentary approval, specifically of both the houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So when a government has clear majority, at least in the Lok Sabha, it does make it easy for the government to push through these reforms. One recent example is that of the goods and services tax, which required a constitutional amendment. That meant that the bill had to be passed by both the houses of parliament by a 2/3 majority. It did help the NDA government, the fact that they had a good majority, a clean majority in the Lok Sabha, and they were able to rustle up the numbers in the Rajya Sabha. So to a lot of extent, a lot of these reforms can be pushed ahead if you have the numbers. For this government, when it comes into power, land and labor may be 2 big reforms that they may have to bring in. Labor reforms have been the need of the hour, have been felt for a long time. Again, land acquisition norms also had to be, the previous government had tried to change these land acquisition norms, but unsuccessfully because they faced a lot of opposition. So, it will depend on what kind of numbers the new government comes in with if they want to push through these critical reforms. Then there are many other reforms also that they have to be brought in, and it will depend on the will of the government and also the numbers that they have. One question we have is what should be the main priorities of the next government? I think the government's immediate challenge will be reviving economic growth. At least in the second half of 2018-19, economy is said to have slowed down. The final numbers will come in by May end, and we will know the extent of the slowdown that we are facing. But all economic indicators do show that there is a slowdown, be it auto sales, which have slowed down greatly, sharply in the last few months. We also have rural consumption numbers that have weakened significantly. The tax collection numbers are another indication of the fact that we are heading towards a slowdown. Tax revenues have fallen by more than 1.5 trillion, less than what has been estimated in the revised estimates of the budget. So that means that the last quarter slowdown has been more significant and sharper than what was initially estimated. So I guess the first priority for the government will be to address this. The second would be obviously to revive rural demand. Rural demand has slowed down significantly, mainly on account of the rural distress that has been in the news for the last few months. an adverse weather is something that we're not really sure of how the monsoons will pan out. The forecast is of a near normal monsoon, but again, the monsoons are already late by a few days, and it will also depend on how exactly what will be the distribution of the monsoon. So last time we saw monsoon not being very evenly distributed, and some of the central states like Madhya Pradesh facing the brunt of it. So these will be the factors that will depend on whether the rural economy will revive. Another question that we have is that Manmohan Singh is regarded as a capable economist. India's GDP growth rate in 2010-11, which falls during his second term as the Prime Minister, is the highest recorded even after the recalibrated GDP data. How Modi stands here? So if you will remember, the numbers have been revised upwards. There has been revised upwards for the previous few years, but have been revised downwards for the Manmohan era. So if you purely go by the numbers, the revised numbers, the growth rates in the Modi regime will any day be better than the average growth rates in the Manmohan Singh second tenure. But as you correctly stated, that this is also because of the fact that the numbers for the Manmohan era have been revised downwards as per the back series of the GDP. Dhaval Shah is asking, if does it apply that market also wanted and bullish for Modi too? If they're not happy with current government, sentiment should be opposite, seeing NDA coming for another 5 years. I guess one could say, because the exit polls, the markets may be welcoming the fact that the exit polls are showing a stable and stable government, a government which has a clear majority, which is not dependent on probably untrustworthy allies. So that could be a big reason. Another reason is that the policies of the Modi government will continue. So there will not be any nasty surprises that the markets will see. So these could be the reasons rather than the government, the markets really rooting for one side or the other. Another question is, job creation has been a long-standing challenge for the Modi government despite several initiatives to tackle it. Available data shows that unemployment rate has maintained an upward trend between June 2017 and December 2018. That is right. Job creation has been a big challenge for the Modi government. The unemployment rate is said to have reached in 2017-18 at a record high of 6.1%. So that is obviously a challenge. Though the government says that they have introduced schemes like the Mudra, which help in generating a lot of self-employment, but again it has not managed to create manufacturing jobs, which are major job creators. Service sector has grown well, but manufacturing or labor-intensive sectors is where you see the bulk of employment creation, and that is something that the Modi government has not been able to do. If you will remember, the Congress manifesto promised a push for manufacturing and also promised the filling up of a lot of government jobs, because according to the Congress at least, filling up of government jobs, at least central government jobs, will ensure again a lot of people will get employment in the government itself. Another question that we have is that the recalculated GDP data shows how Indian economy is growing 0.6% faster under PM Modi as opposed to time during the UPA 2 government, but it is still a long way from attaining double-digit growth. Yes, as I said just a few minutes before, the 5 years growth under the Modi government seems to be, the average of the 5-year growth under the Modi government is comparatively higher compared to what it was 5 years under the second tenure of the Manmohan Singh government. Partly it is also because of the fact that the numbers for between 2009 and 14 have been revised downwards because of this controversial GDP back series data. So, the new GDP data, which is based on a back series. So that is one of the reasons why this is happening. Again, under Manmohan Singh, if we were to go by those numbers, the previous numbers, India did record double-digit growth at least in 1 year, that's in 2010-11. But that number has now been revised downwards to 8.5%. But yes, double-digit growth still seems to be very far away, because we are maybe struggling to even reach 7% in 2018-19. And if you go by this, the slowdown will at least continue for the next 2-3 quarters. So we may not even reach 7% for next year. One obviously will have to wait for the CSO's final estimates to know how much do we grow in the next year. And one question we have is, the BJP government has followed prudent fiscal policies for the most part. The government has stayed away from any large handouts to boost the economy when it appeared that growth was faltering. it is true that the government has not really given any large handouts. So they, at least in the initially, they had followed a policy of not of any entitlement policy. But unfortunately for this government, tax revenues have been slowing sharply. Implementation of the goods and services tax and the initial confusion that followed the implementation of the tax meant that taxes from indirect taxes have fallen sharply. So because of this, we are seeing a huge shortfall in indirect tax collections. Again, on the direct tax front also, one major problem that we are facing is the fact that though post demonetization there was a surge for a short period around a year, again the taxpayer base is again contracting. So these two present a challenge for the government in terms of the fact that the revenues are not growing and they have to still maintain expenditure. A lot of our investment right now is public investment led rather than private investment, because of which fiscally I will not agree that we are in a very great space. Another question that we have is India has failed to make any significant progress in pushing exports as a lever of growth, and why? Yes, it's correct that India has not been able to grow its exports much. In fact, we have struggled and our trade deficit has been constantly rising. There's been a lot of talk of a need for a focused export policy wherein India focuses on a key markets. India is facing a lot of competition in textiles, in sectors like textiles, jewelry, gems and jewelry, leather, and from countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, who are able to produce it at a lower cost than compared to India. So yes, there needs to be a focused effort to increase our exports, because domestic consumption-led growth may not have a very, may not last for long. Piyush Kant is asking that what is your view on GDP data controversy? GDP data controversy has been going on for the last few months, and I think many economists and many social scientists, the chartered accountants have all voiced their view. I think there is the need for an independent statistical commission which ensures that all data is put out objectively and quickly and after being vetted by them rather than any government that is in power. Deepak Saroji is asking, if macroeconomics has not been up to the mark of Modi term, then why still corporate world and industries want second term for Modi? And can we reach double-digit GDP in the next 5 years? Again, the last 5 years of the Modi government is the first time in a few years where we've had one party getting a clear majority on its own. That meant that the Modi government could take a lot of decisions, a lot of bold decisions, without facing any coalition pressure. This could be one of the reasons why you have many industrialists rooting for PM Modi. And again, double-digit growth, it will really depend on how well we are able to counter the slowdown that we are currently facing. Next 5 years, yes, it's possible, but it will depend on the kind of policies that will come in to encourage investment, especially private sector investment. Market, someone is asking if market is overreacted without looking into recent indicators and valuation, and is it so? I guess markets have their own mind, and we always see very sharp swings around elections depending on what the market is thinking and what the market has built up. One will have to wait and see on how the market reacts on May 23rd when the actual elections results come out. And that's all we have at ThePrint. Thank you.